She left the place she once called home with nothing but a suitcase full of memories and a heart full of hope. She stepped onto the crowded streets of a city that smelled of smoke and ambition, and wondered if she had made the right choice. Every face she passed seemed like a story she would never know. Every building towered like a challenge, daring her to turn back. But she kept walking because the fire inside her whispered that the world was bigger than her fears and brighter than the shadows she carried with her. The nights were cold and the days were long, and she learned to survive in a language that felt foreign on her tongue. Yet every word she mastered was a victory. Every sentence she spoke was a bridge to a future she could only dream of. She remembered the smell of bread in her grandmother's kitchen, the songs her mother used to hum, the way the sun fell through the windows at home, and she carried those memories like a secret warmth against the chill of the unknown. She worked in quiet places where no one noticed her at first, and yet her hands learned the rhythm of effort, her eyes learned the patience of waiting, her heart learned the strength of believing that one day the world would notice her, not for the girl who had come from nowhere, but for the woman who refused to stay there. She met others like her, people who had crossed oceans, deserts, mountains, and fear itself, and together they became a chorus of determination, a melody that spoke of survival, of courage that could not be silenced. There were moments of doubt when the nights felt endless and her reflection in the glass of office windows seemed to mock her dreams, and yet she remembered why she had come, why she had risked everything for a chance at possibility. She remembered the promise she had whispered to herself, that she would not just exist, she would live, she would shine, she would make a mark in a world that had once seemed too vast, too indifferent, too cruel. And slowly the city began to recognize her. She built bridges where there were walls. She turned obstacles into stepping stones. She found allies in strangers and mentors in unexpected corners. And the work she poured her soul into began to bloom like the flowers her mother had planted in the small courtyard at home. And she understood that destiny was not a gift. It was something you carved with your own hands, with persistence, with sweat, with love, and with courage. Her story became a quiet revolution. It was not loud or flashy, but it was real. It was felt in the eyes of those who watched her rise, in the nods of those who had walked beside her, in the whispers of those who said, "Perhaps I too can take a step forward and change my own path." And she realized that her journey was not hers alone, that every small victory was a light in the darkness for someone else who had been told they could not. She never forgot where she came from, the streets, the smells, the faces that shaped her. She carried her past not as a chain, but as a compass, guiding her through the unfamiliar. Every decision, every risk, every late night, and every early morning was a brushstroke, painting the portrait of a life that was hers to claim. And the woman who had once arrived with nothing became a force that could not be ignored, a name that inspired hope, a story that reminded everyone that courage can be born in exile, and dreams can thrive in foreign lands. And as she looked back at the journey she had taken, she felt the weight of what she had endured and the beauty of what she had created. She knew that the path had been hard, but it had also been magnificent, that the tears, the failures, the fears had been the very ingredients of triumph, that the woman she had become was built from every moment she had lived, every lesson she had learned, every risk she had taken, and in that understanding she smiled, knowing that destiny is not something you wait for, it is something you fight for, something you build, something you become. And she had become it all.
She woke each morning with the weight of dreams pressing against her chest, yet she rose because she had promised herself that she would not surrender to the heaviness that life could bring. She walked the streets where the sunlight fell unevenly through the cracks of buildings, where the sounds of a city that never slept mingled with the hopes of those who dared to chase something better. And she carried herself with a quiet determination that was invisible to those who did not look closely, but unmistakable to those who had learned to recognize the shape of courage in another human being. Her first apartment was small and smelled faintly of old paint and unwashed floors, but she made it her sanctuary. She draped the windows with fabric she had carried from home. She placed the few belongings she had with care. She lit a candle each night to remind herself that even in the unfamiliar darkness, there could be light. And every night she fell asleep imagining the life she wanted to create, imagining a future that was not dictated by fear, but inspired by hope. She worked jobs that left her hands raw and her spirit weary, yet she never complained because she understood that each task, no matter how small, was a thread in the tapestry of her destiny. And she learned to move with grace through spaces that were indifferent to her presence. She learned to smile when she felt invisible. She learned to speak even when the words tasted foreign in her mouth. And slowly, the world began to shift around her. Doors that had been closed began to open. Opportunities that had seemed out of reach appeared like gifts wrapped in the patience she had cultivated. There were nights when loneliness crept into her apartment, when the city outside roared with life, and she felt as though she had been forgotten by the universe. Yet she remembered the faces of those she had left behind, the streets she had walked, the songs she had sung with her family. And she whispered to herself that she was not alone, that every step she had taken was part of a larger journey, that her presence in this new land was an act of courage and defiance, and she would not allow doubt to claim her heart. She found friends who shared her struggle, who understood the weight of leaving everything familiar behind, who knew the taste of fear and the sweetness of survival. And together, they formed a network of resilience, a family not bound by blood, but by shared dreams and quiet strength. And in their laughter, she discovered joy that had been hidden beneath years of sacrifice. And in their shared tears, she found validation that suffering could be transformed into growth, and that every setback was merely the prelude to a breakthrough yet to come. Her days became a rhythm of learning and striving. She absorbed knowledge like a parched earth absorbs rain. She mastered skills that opened doors she had once thought permanently closed. She cultivated patience in the face of repeated failures. She discovered creativity in moments of scarcity. She learned to speak her mind in rooms that had never welcomed her voice. And gradually, she became a presence that demanded attention, not through force, but through consistency, through excellence, through the quiet power of showing up every single day and refusing to be diminished by circumstances. The seasons changed, and the city shifted around her, yet she remained steadfast. She planted roots in soil that had felt foreign. She celebrated small victories, the first time she received recognition, the first time someone said, "Your work matters," the first time she realized that she had transformed the perception of herself in the eyes of others, and more importantly, in her own eyes. And with each victory, her confidence grew, not arrogantly, but with the humility of someone who understood the cost of every gain and the fragility of every moment. She traveled back in her mind to the girl she once was, the one who had clutched a suitcase in trembling hands, the one who had stared at the unfamiliar streets with equal parts fear and wonder. And she smiled because she had become more than she had ever imagined. She had become a testament to the power of persistence, a living story that reminded everyone who would listen that life does not hand out destinies ready-made, that we are the authors of our own fates, and that every choice, no matter how small, shapes the landscape of the life we will live. And when she stood at the window of the apartment she had made into a home, she saw beyond the streets to the horizon, beyond the city to the vast possibilities that stretched like a promise before her. She thought of every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, and she understood that they were not obstacles, but teachers, that each had molded her into someone capable of change, someone capable of love, someone capable of leaving a mark on the world that would endure long after she was gone. And in that understanding, she breathed deeply, knowing that the journey itself was the reward, and that she had changed not only her own destiny, but the destiny of those who would follow in her footsteps.
Time moved forward not in straight lines, but in waves, and she learned how to ride them without losing herself. She learned that progress was not always visible, that some days growth happened quietly beneath the surface, where no one could applaud it, and yet it mattered the most. She carried herself through moments of exhaustion, through days when her body ached and her spirit felt stretched thin, and still she showed up, because showing up had become her silent rebellion against a world that once expected her to disappear. She began to understand the language of America, not just the words, but the rhythm, the pace, the unspoken rules. She learned when to speak and when to listen, when to push and when to wait. She watched how power moved through rooms, how opportunity favored those who dared to claim space. And slowly she claimed her own space, not loudly, not aggressively, but with certainty and presence, and people began to feel it before they understood it. Her work became more than survival, it became expression. Every effort carried intention, every project held a piece of her story, and those who encountered her could sense that there was something deeper driving her, something shaped by loss and longing and an unbreakable will. She did not seek validation, yet it found her in subtle ways, in respect earned, in trust built, in doors opened without asking, and she knew then that she had crossed an invisible threshold. There were sacrifices that no one saw, birthdays missed, holidays spent alone, moments when distance felt heavier than words could carry, and yet she honored those sacrifices because they had purpose. She told herself that pain without meaning is suffering, but pain with direction becomes power, and she chose power every time. She chose to keep going. She stood in rooms where decisions were made and realized she belonged there, not because someone allowed her, but because she had earned it. Her voice steady, her mind clear, her presence undeniable. She spoke with the weight of lived experience, and people listened not out of sympathy, but out of respect. And in those moments, she felt the echo of every step she had taken to arrive there. Her reflection changed over time, not just in appearance, but in energy. The fear that once clouded her eyes had been replaced by clarity, the uncertainty softened into confidence, and when she smiled, it carried the depth of someone who had known struggle and survived it. She became a mirror for others, especially women, who saw in her a possibility they had not allowed themselves to imagine. She mentored without announcing it. She inspired without trying. She led by example, and her story traveled further than she ever expected. Whispered between strangers, shared in quiet conversations, repeated in moments of doubt and hope, and she realized that legacy is not something you plan, it is something you live, every day through how you treat others, how you rise after falling, how you stay true to yourself when it would be easier to fade into the background. There were moments when she returned to the memories of her homeland, not with sorrow but with gratitude. She honored the roots that shaped her, the culture that raised her, the resilience that had been passed down through generations. She understood now that she had not left her identity behind. She had carried it forward, transformed, expanded, made stronger by every challenge she faced. America had tested her, but it had also revealed her. It had stripped away illusions and forced her to confront who she truly was. And in that confrontation, she found purpose, she found direction, she found the courage to dream bigger than survival. She began to imagine impact, influence, change. She began to envision a life that reached beyond herself. She invested in others, lifted voices, opened paths, shared wisdom, and in doing so she multiplied her strength. She became part of something larger than her own story, a movement of resilience, a testament to the power of persistence and hope, and through it all she remained grounded, remembering the girl who once stood at the edge of the unknown, holding on to hope like a lifeline. When setbacks came, and they did, she met them with grace. She allowed herself to feel disappointment, but never defeat. She understood now that failure was not a verdict, but a lesson, and she learned quickly, adapted fearlessly, and moved forward stronger each time. Her resilience became instinct, her courage automatic, her faith in herself unshakable. She looked toward the future with steady eyes, no longer afraid of uncertainty, because she had learned that uncertainty is where growth lives, where transformation begins. She trusted herself to navigate whatever came next, because she had already survived what once felt impossible. And in quiet moments, when the world slowed, she allowed herself to feel pride, not arrogance, not entitlement, but a deep, grounded pride in who she had become. She had crossed borders, broken barriers, rewritten expectations. She had taken a story that began in loss and turned it into one of purpose and power. She understood now that destiny is not a single moment or achievement, it is the accumulation of choices made in courage and integrity and love, and she had chosen wisely, she had chosen herself, she had chosen to rise. And somewhere in the vast rhythm of the city, a new woman arrived carrying fear and hope in equal measure, stepping into the unknown, and though they would never meet, her journey would be lighter, because this one had walked before her, leaving behind a path of possibility, proof that transformation is real, that dreams survive distance, and that a woman can cross oceans and still arrive fully whole, fully powerful, fully alive.
And when the noise of the world finally softened, she stood still, not because she had reached the end, but because she understood the meaning of the journey. She looked back, not with regret, but with reverence for the woman she once was, and gratitude for the woman she had become. She realized that home was never a place on a map. It was the courage she carried, the values she protected, the dreams she refused to abandon. She had crossed borders, but more importantly, she had crossed limitations. She had broken cycles, rewritten narratives, and healed wounds that were older than her own life. She no longer asked for permission to exist, to dream, to lead. She simply did, and the world adjusted around her. Her destiny was no longer something waiting ahead. It was alive in every breath she took, in every life she touched, in every path she opened for those who came after her. She became proof that loss can turn into strength, that silence can become a voice, and that a woman who dares to believe in herself can transform generations. And as the sun rose over the city she once feared, she smiled softly, knowing that she had not just survived America, she had shaped her place within it. She had turned struggle into purpose, pain into power, and a fragile beginning into an unbreakable legacy. This was not the end of her story. This was the moment she became the beginning for others.